Hello, everyone. Welcome to Coffee Break. I'm Steve Barrett. I'm the editorial director of PR Week, bringing you another episode. Really delighted to have Michael Kaye with us, who's the global PR manager at OkCupid. So we're going to talk about online dating today. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, really interesting business, OkCupid, and part of Match Group, which is obviously an umbrella organization for a lot of dating sites. And we'll get into the sort of specifics of OkCupid versus the rest of them, and what you've got to offer, because you've got some really interesting data, in-app data that has been fascinating, especially over the last 18 months. But tell us a bit about your joining OkCupid. I think you joined in July 2019. Maybe the first 6 months were tranquil enough, and then all of a sudden we had COVID-19. You know, we had the racial reckoning last year. We had all the fun and games around the election. So it's been, shall we say, an interesting 18 months.
Interesting is definitely the word for it. So yes, I joined the company back in summer 2019, and one of my first big undertakings was growing the brand internationally. We had a couple of teams outside the US, and since then I've been able to hire agencies across Europe, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, and Oceania, and we're only continuing to grow. But to your point, going into my first full year at the brand, we had to adapt to a global pandemic and the largest civil rights movement of my generation. And really wrapped up the year with a pretty interesting presidential election here in the United States. So it's been an interesting time to work at a dating app with, tens of millions of daters who are impacted by these, moments.
How do you do? I mean, I'm out of the game. I'm happily married, and I'm sure there's plenty of people who are on it and who are married as well. But anyway, but how do you online date when you can't actually meet up with someone? And what trends have you seen in dating in that time? Post COVID.
Yeah. So actually, at the beginning of the pandemic, we saw engagement skyrocket on our platform, and young women were actually really leading the charge here. So the pace at which we date is all different, and sometimes in cities like New York City or London or Los Angeles, it could really feel like a marathon. But because the pressure of rushing to meet up with someone in real life had slowed down, women started to feel, more liberated and became more active and engaged in their dating lives. So that was one of the first, huge trends we started to see at the beginning of the pandemic. And then obviously virtual dating boomed. Over 90% of OkCupid respondents said the pandemic was not stopping them dating. They just started dating digitally and virtually through messaging on the app or texting or video chats via FaceTime or Zoom. So dating really didn't slow down. It actually just adapted. And we've seen that trend across all the markets we're in. And we have users in over 110 countries around the world.
So have you seen any interesting developments in the way people do date virtually? Are there any fun things that have started up, or are there any trends that you've noticed, especially now that we've been going, 9-10 months, and, that's a long time to date virtually, isn't it?
Yeah, it definitely is. We've heard a lot of really interesting dates among daters, and people got really creative. We heard of a couple who, started a book club with one of their matches, and they would, spend time during the day reading separately and then jump on FaceTime every single night to sort of talk through what, they had been reading that day. There were other daters who might be in less congested areas like New York City, where they're able to go outside and social distance date, and they were going on runs and hikes together. So some people getting, a little bit more active, but most people were really just interested in doing any kind of shared activity like painting via Zoom. I think in the beginning, there was a heavy emphasis on dinner dates and cooking together. And then people got a little bored and started to get really creative and scrappy in the type of virtual dates that, they were going on.
Yeah, because I think at the start of the pandemic, everyone was kind of Zooming with friends in the evening, weren't they? And it was a thing. But then you're like, well, I'm actually on Zoom all day, and I don't really want to. I can't be. It's exhausting, isn't it? So you don't necessarily want to do it in the evening as well. So did you find that changed over the months, and people the trends changed there?
A little bit. I think everyone really got Zoom fatigue. 6 to 8 months in, we were at least at OkCupid, we were going on not just Zoom meetings, but we were doing Zoom trivia and Zoom happy hour, and the company's been really great at keeping us engaged. But because we're on Zoom so much because of work, I think daters started to, get a little bored, and it's been really nice for those people who are able to, go on social distance date, and still be safe about dating. That's one thing we know about our users, is that they're taking the pandemic extremely seriously. Hundreds of thousands of people said that they would cancel a date with someone who didn't want a social distance date, or weren't willing to wear a mask. And coming into 2021, a new trend we're seeing now that the vaccine is becoming more available is that getting vaccinated has become sort of the hottest thing you can do on a dating app. There was a 63% increase in mentions of vaccine on OkCupid profiles last month compared to the month prior, which was November. And we also know through our in-app matching questions, we have a new series of questions about dating during the pandemic, which has been answered over 15 million times. But one of our newer questions is simply asking people, will you get the COVID-19 vaccine? And the majority of the people said yes. But what's really interesting is that the users that said yes instead of no to that question are being liked at a rate of up to 25% higher. So it's not only good for your, health and safety to be taking the pandemic seriously and be open to getting the vaccine, but it's actually a lot better for your dating life as well.
Yeah, that's good to hear, actually. And, maybe it's going to be a case of no vaccine, no date in the future, or for the rest of this year. How would you describe the OkCupid's consumers compared to other daters on the other brands in your group, like Match.com, and you've got Hinge and Tinder? What defines the OkCupid data again in comparison?
Yeah, I think, and this isn't a comment towards the other apps, but I think what I personally love about OkCupid is that we tend to have more higher intent daters. And what I mean by that is people on OkCupid aren't usually looking for just a quick Saturday night. They're looking for Saturday nights for the rest of their lives. And, our app is really designed to bring in those type of daters. You don't just upload your name and a few photos and call it a day when making an account on OkCupid. You have to answer at least 15 of our, in-app matching questions, and then add a, number of photos. There are prompts for you to fill out. So it does take a little bit longer to create a profile, but because of that, we have daters who are, taking dating a little bit more seriously, and they're looking for, that relationship that might end in marriage and children. Another thing about our daters is that they're really attuned to social political issues. They were really impacted by the Black Lives Matter movement. They care about their right to vote, and exercising that right. And that's why you see some of the marketing activities from OkCupid that we roll out. For example, during the Black Lives Matter movement last year, we launched the first ever Black Lives Matter badge on our profile. And over, about 800,000 people added that badge to their OkCupid profile. We also added in new questions about racial equality, which got about 3 million responses. So it was a huge conversation. And there were other things that went along with this announcement. We donated to the ACLU, Black Girls Code, Fair Fight Action, the NAACP. We also donated $1 million in advertising space on OkCupid to Black civil rights organizations, because we know our users really care about these issues.
Yeah, so it's a less transactional, so to put it mildly, and maybe ideally suited to the pandemic environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And we didn't stop there. Obviously, it was a really challenging summer last year, but it didn't get any easier during fall. We then in the United States had to deal with this historic and really unique presidential election, and our matching questions about politics and voting have been answered more than 105 million times. So we know this is a huge issue for people on OkCupid, which is why we launched our voter badge. And about 500,000 people added that badge to their profile. And the badge was triggered by a question. And the question was, are you registered to vote in the 2020 presidential election? For anybody who said yes, they obviously got the badge. But for anybody who said no, they were then redirected to a page that we created with When We All Vote, where daters directly from our app could go register for the presidential election. And it benefited their love lives. Registered voters on our app were 85% more likely to get a match, to get a message, and 63% more likely to get a match. So we're seeing this trend in people being really engaged in these issues are actually finding more success on the app.
So voting and democracy is sexy. It's official, yeah?
Absolutely.
When the insurrection happened at the Capitol, we saw on some dating sites, I think women especially, setting up profiles to try and almost entrap the rioters who were boasting on some of these sites about what they'd done on the day, and actually some of them got arrested as a result of that. Is that something that you saw on OkCupid, or is that not really the profile of your users?
It wasn't really a trend we necessarily saw on OkCupid, but we're also a platform that doesn't encourage that type of behavior. The typical OkCupid user is a little bit more concerned about these social issues that we're talking about. And this isn't a new trend for OkCupid. Years ago, in case you don't remember, there were the Charlottesville riots, and OkCupid actually found that years ago, one of the people at the riots were on OkCupid, Chris Cantwell, and we actually banned him for life on the platform. And we made a really simple statement about it. And really what we said was that in a place where you're looking for love, there's no room for hate. And that ideology has carried, has stayed true to who OkCupid is. And, today we don't really see those type of people flocking to our platform specifically.
Got it. So we've got Black History Month coming up. We've also got Valentine's Day. Have you got any communications plans or marketing plans in the works that you can tell us about?
Yeah. So unfortunately, nothing I can say yet. However, definitely keep your eyes on OkCupid. There is a lot of really groundbreaking, provocative work coming around Valentine's Day from our brand, actually a little bit earlier than that. So definitely stay tuned. And it'll really tie to the inclusivity that we tend to always promote on our platform.
So we saw, I'm sure you do something for Valentine's Day every year, but with other holidays and other, like Christmas and Thanksgiving, we saw things starting a lot earlier. Are we going to see that this year as well with Valentine's Day, or is it very much more concentrated?
No, definitely. You will see some work coming out of us for early February. So definitely keep an eye out during those first few days of the month.
So just to finish up, tell us where you see this space going now. I mean, a lot of industries have been disrupted by the pandemic and by the events of the last 15 months. And we have an economic crisis in this country as a result of that. A lot of people are suffering. How do you think the business will evolve? And I think you're moving into a new office in Meatpacking in New York. So people have been looking at their workspace and the future of work as well. So tell us how that might play into it too.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is going to be a very interesting year for dating apps. To your point, a lot of industries were hit really, really hard by the pandemic. But dating this has really become the best moment ever for dating. I think we went through a really rough year last year. People felt more alone than ever before. A lot of us had to be home alone while we were reading headlines about Black people being murdered across the country and around the world, especially Black transgender people. We had to deal with a really challenging presidential election. Some of us were up for days on end, and it was just emotionally taxing. And going into 2021, what we're seeing is people really don't want to be alone for these huge moments anymore. They want people that they can really rely on. And on OkCupid, we're seeing a really big rise in romance. People are talking longer, and they're looking to really build that emotional connection with someone before a physical one. So I think the relationships that we're going to see form during 2020 and 2021 are going to be a lot stronger than the relationships we saw in years past. And it'll be an exciting year for the employees as well. As you mentioned, we're moving into a new office space. Come fall, we'll all be back in the office. Hopefully, fingers crossed.
Hopefully.
It'll be the first time we're all together for almost 2 years now, at least a year and a half. So it'll be nice to see how what work comes from that, and how creative and collaborative we get now that we'll all be back in the same space.
Yeah, you make a really good point there. Everyone needs emotional support at the moment. The mental health issues are massive, and a lot of young people living in cities on their own. It's been a tough time. So good work on that front, and look forward to seeing what you're doing for Valentine's Day and beyond. Thank you for joining us, Michael. Been great to catch up with you for Coffee Break.
Yes, thank you for having me.